Okay, let's start discussing QPR against Leicester this weekend. Are you fearing a cricket score, Jared?
I or I've seen. I think it was a few years ago this week that they beat Southampton 9-0, and I fear that it genuinely could be a similar scoreline.
I mean,
Um,
I hope for your sakes not, because it would compound a miserable week for Rangers.
yeah,
We look back then at the Huddersfield game when we last spoke. You were obviously going to head to the John Smith Stadium, and you were perhaps hopeful of a draw, or even perhaps sneaking a win. And you played very well, didn't you? But just let two goals in before you started to play well.
yeah. It was all fine after 20 minutes. They actually played all right. I think the bar is so low that any kind of performance where we score and create a couple of chances is seen as a good performance nowadays. But they just didn't give themselves a chance in that opening 15 minutes. So um, yeah, they could have nicked a point. They hit the post. Armstrong probably should have scored the rebound, but when you give teams a 2-0 start, then there's not much chance. I don't think we've come from behind to win a game in over a year now. So
Okay,
um,
let's put that to one side then. And then now West Brom. I mean, this was 0-0 for so long. Chances for both sides. Talk to us about this one, because this is probably is more harder to take, I'm guessing.
yeah, it was maybe the worst 45 minutes of football I've seen in a long time. If you get a chance, watch the highlights from the first half. I think they include two things: a shot that almost went out from a throw in, and a header that was about 20 yards off target. That was literally all that happened in the first half. And Ainsworth came out at full time and said our game plan was working up until the penalty, but there was literally no game plan apart from park park that bus and just hope to get a point. Now, West Brom aren't exactly setting the world on fire. So to say the game plan was working, there really wasn't a game plan apart from just hope not to concede. And then you give away the most ridiculous penalty you're going to see. Have a man sent off for scuffing the penalty spot and coming on the pitch too soon after having treatment. It just idiots basically.
Yeah. I don't want to sound too depressive, but is it time now? Thank Ainsworth, a legend as a player, great servant, but out of his depth at this level, or is he because of his status? Is he unsackable?
No, no. I would say 95% of the fan base now is fully behind a change of manager, and a lot of people, it's just not. I think it's just not worked out for him. But I've got some stats here. So a year ago, on the 22nd of October, QPR were top of the championship. Since then, we've won one home game. We've got 23 points from a possible 102 points. Ainsworth had 27 games in charge, lost 18 of them. We've only scored 19 goals in those games. Three teams have won more games at Loftus Road in 2023 than QPR, and Leicester have scored more goals in October than we've scored since April. So it's time for a change, and whether or not they've got the finances to actually pay off another manager, that's another thing. But I think if they lose at the weekend, which they're going to, I think it'll be curtains for him because we've got Rotherham next weekend, which is going to be huge. So
Yeah, Rotherham and Bristol City and then international break. Is it not the case that they're leaving in just those final games, just a chance to beat Rotherham and Bristol City, and then make a decision from there?
I think most fans would have made the change at the last international break after that Blackburn game. So to give them 4 or 5 more games where the gap at the moment is 6 points. So if somebody comes in and we're 9 points off safety or 12 points off safety, it literally looks like an impossible job. There seems to be lots of candidates out there that the fans would like. Neil Warnock's probably top of the list, and it kind of makes sense because that would be a very short term fix. There's no director of football, so you're not going to make a long term appointment, and you wouldn't trust the people in charge to make a long term appointment either.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Would that be your first pick?
pardon?
Would that be your first pick? Sorry.
I personally think Warburton should never have gone in the first place. I don't think he would come back. Probably a couple of weeks ago, I was dead against Warnock coming back. I just think it's a very short-term appointment. The longer that goes on, the more I'm warming to it. And the other name that seems to be floating about is Michael Beale coming back. And again, 2 weeks ago, I'd have been like, absolutely not. And even there's part of me now that would be quite interested to see what would happen if that did happen. But probably Warnock or Eustace, but I'm not sure Eustace would have a short-term impact. But
okay.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it seems a shame to sack a likable fella, but it's come across in his interviews that he's always one to never sort of blame the players. He doesn't hang them out to dry ever, does he? He kind of, backs the lads, and it's a project and so on. But there's a time and a place for that, isn't it? And fans just want him to come out and just say, yeah, we're short in this area. That wasn't good enough. He's a nice guy, but he doesn't seem to be a cutthroat manager at this level.
No, his pre-match interview for the Leicester game is 11 minutes long, and again, it's all about that positivity, backing the players, saying the fans should get behind them because they're giving their all for the club, and the players seem to be getting off with quite a lot. I think from the fans, I think all the anger's aimed at the manager and the board, but they've kind of failed under 3 or 4 managers now. They had the massive dip under Warburton, and then Beale's last 5 games, Critchley, and now Ainsworth. So, however, I do think they're being set up to fail by the manager. So,
okay. All right, dare I ask for a score prediction then? QPR against Leicester.
We've probably got our first 4 choice centre backs injured or suspended for Saturday. So Steve Cook's a big doubt, Clark Salter's a big doubt, Jimmy Dunn's suspended, Morgan Fox is out till after the international break. Even if we had those 4 fit, I would give us no chance. But the fact that we're going to have a completely makeshift back 3 or back 5, whatever he chooses to do, and it's probably the first time I'll ever say this, if you offered me a 3-0 defeat now, I would probably take it. And the only seed that is there is when we went to Burnley away at the end of last season, we were all thinking the same thing there, that it could be an absolute cricket score, and they managed to pull out a 2-1 win. So there's that tiny, the smallest glimmer that, who knows, maybe we'll surprise everybody, but I'll go 3 or 4-0, I think.
All right. That's probably the first time on this podcast we've had a home supporter predict a 4-0 loss. But Leicester are good, aren't they? Right, Jawad, listen, I really appreciate you coming on here every week. It must be torture for you listening to, Middlesbrough fans, and
Ipswich fans. It's Ipswich fans, pal, yeah.
Ipswich, yeah. Okay. You'll be here with a smile 1 week.
It's quite therapeutic to talk about it. So,
all right. All right. Cheers, Jawad. We'll catch you.
Thank you.
Cheers, fella.
Thanks.